There it is. So it's May 20th, 2020 today, right?
The 21st.
The 21st. The 21st, yeah, yesterday was the 20th. So it's been like, hard to believe it's been almost a decade since we were at the dinner before Site 100. And we had Python and John and Walter Day and Steve Sanders and his sons and my wife, who is now in sainthood for letting me play Joust for the last decade, and all the fun people there. I enjoyed watching the dynamic of people interacting who hadn't talked to each other on a technical level for 30 years. I mean, it was great fun. More fun than actually playing at Williams, I think, although that was pretty cool. So I wanted to catch up with you and get some of the stuff on tape about your thoughts about Joust, because it's now, July will be the 40th anniversary of Joust. Wow. 40th anniversary of Joust. I remember what I was doing in 1982. I was young and I had girlfriends. That's all I need to know, right? And my hair wasn't gray. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and feel free to expand on them, because this is about what your thoughts are on Joust, and I'll kind of guide you through them. If you want to go into another area, feel free to go off into them. But I thought we'd start with, what were your job functions at WMS, so Williams, and I assume you went from Williams Pinball into Joust, and kind of, I was just talking to you about one of my favorite pinball machines, which is Flight 2000, which was a great pinball that you worked on. So kind of, how did you get into Joust, and what were your responsibilities?
Well, basically I was a programmer. I started in the pinball area, and then my first video game was Joust. So
nice.
They wanted a game to be developed relatively fast on existing hardware, because they were developing new hardware, and that takes time.
Sure.
So they needed something to go in between. They had just, produced Stargate.
Stargate, yeah.
So we used their hardware,
right,
to do Joust, and that was one of the requirements. Actually, the first requirement was just the hardware.
Right.
Then we went into John Newcomer and I went into a room and decided, okay, what game of his, he had a list of ideas, and which one could be implemented on the existing hardware.
Yeah.
And Joust was the winner.
Nice, nice. Well, obviously it turned out to be a good choice. And so when we talk about existing hardware, we're also talking about other components too, like the flap buttons and leave switches and all the things that could be interused on numerous games, which made it easier to make it that one in between.
Of course, the controls, those are pretty standard. But the flap idea, when I came up with it and told John that I could do the pseudo physics on a small 8-bit microprocessor, he was surprised and anxious to see what we could do. So
I have another question for you. How do you come up with the nickname Pfutz? Because everybody says Pfutz. Now I think I got it. Pfutz and Reuter.
It's short for Pfutz and Reuter. Yeah, Reuter, Reiter. We couldn't agree in our family how to pronounce it, anyways. But my father actually adopted that when he worked at Sears, because the name was just way too long.
Yeah.
And Pfutz was a lot easier to remember. But it was spelled P-F-U-T-Z, not F-O-T-S.
Nice. Well, it's kind of endearing. I look at it and I go, that's got to be a pretty good nickname to have, cutting it down short. Because that's, when you talk to John or you talk to Python or somebody, it wasn't Pfutz and Reuter, it wasn't Bill, it wasn't William, it was Pfutz.
Well, you always get a bunch of surprised faces when someone says Pfutz called or something like that.
Yeah.
What?
Which one, the left or the right one, right? Exactly. Good stuff. So, one of the things I heard was how the pixels were modified so you could get rounded edges.
Oh, okay. Well, that was the artist, okay.
Yeah.
And actually, there was two artists on that project, Jan Hendricks and Python Angelo. Jan started it, and Python added in. Python did the pterodactyl, and Jan did the original ostrich. She was very good at that, and it was very low resolution graphics.
Right.
So she made all this art of the ostrich walking and everything, all the little frames, because there was walking animation and then there was flying animations. There was two different kinds. So, but one of the problems later on in the project is because we had such a small screen and the birds, they were very beautiful. Mm-hmm. They were large. Yeah. So there wasn't much play area. And then we started to run out of memory.
Right.
Because we only had 48 code for art and code back then. Not meg or gig or whatever, tera. Right. K. Sounds were separate on a separate sound system, so we didn't have to worry about that, at least.
Right.
But we were running out of space as we developed the game. And then becomes the great debate of either, downsizing the art or somehow downsizing the code.
Right.
All right. And Jan was very for keeping her art the same, and it was beautiful art, no mistake. But I was for, of course, downsizing the art and keeping the code and actually making the code bigger. The decision was finally, I don't remember who made the decision, but the decision was made to downsize the art, and that broke Jan's heart. Python came in and helped because he was pretty good. He'd done the pterodactyl and done all sorts of different colors on it. He was very graphic and very verbal on all the fiery colors of the, even at low resolution.
Yeah.
But and so he came and downsized the art. That actually made it more fun to play because you had more play area.
Right. So the pixels are square, correct?
Well, round, I think,
Roundy,
more
square.
or less. They could be square. I mean, this is the old-fashioned vacuum tube CRT screens.
So what I heard was, feel free to clarify, is how they got the edges to be round was dimming the pixel.
You didn't have very many pixels to work with, so you had to choose your colors. Very carefully. The crispness, and you had limited colors. You had only 256 different colors.
Right.
A byte represented each pixel.
Nice.
And what was it? Two bits of blue, because blue people can't really see blue that well, and then 3 bits of red and green.
You have to have more red and green because people are colorblind.
Yeah. And so actually, wait a minute. Was it? Oh, wait a minute. There was a color palette with that. Ooh, yes, that's right. So each pixel, there was 16 colors then? I think it was actually a nibble. Boy, it's been a long time. A nibble for each color. So I think there was only 16 different colors for that.
So what did you think was the most innovative thing?
Well, the most innovative, it was the flat button and stuff. That actually led itself to a bunch of other games, like running games and things like that.
Bubbles.
Bubbles, yeah. That was more a collision type game with a joystick, a moving type game. Yeah,
the ability to flap and move to create the height and the
to run to the different modes of animations.
Yeah, to me that was one of the things that made it more interesting because it wasn't like everything else. You had to be able to control the space and the distance with two things.
That was probably the new part of that game. So yeah.
Nice.
Not too many games before that. They're either flying or whatever games.
So, what were some of the programming challenges that you had to face?
Most of it was the speed of it because the processor was not that powerful. We had what they called a DMA, which is a pixel pusher, basically, to help write the images onto the screen a lot faster than the CPU can. Defender didn't have that capability. It actually relied upon the CPU to push the pixels onto the screen. So Eugene and Larry came up with a very innovative idea to get that to work. But then Stargate came along with the hardware, and that's what we were using for Joust.
So you got the better hardware rather than pushing it with the CPU.
Yeah.
Which
that helped a lot. Although, again, every time you could see the bog, the players actually would always be refreshed every frame. However, the enemies would be in the remaining time left over. So if there were too many on there, they would go slowly. They'd update slowly. And then you can pick them off easy. But as you picked them off, it's kind of like Space Invaders. They would speed up.
Which I will... Let me comment on that, because I always went, this has to be a refresh thing, because, playing these and you get to a point where they slow down and you're in sync with, at least how I play at a high level, the Shadow Lords are going really fast and they're doing specific things, and then you go, it's like, I have to pause my whole way of thinking because they are now moving slow. And it's almost, even though it wasn't meant to be, it was almost detrimental to the player, because you're now, it's like throwing somebody a curve. So I enjoy that, because it breaks up some of the monotony too if you play for a long time at the same level. So it's interesting to know that wasn't a programming thing. It was simply part of what happened because of it.
Limitation of the CPU and the speeds back then.
Nice. Let's see. Programming challenges, speed, flat buttons. 256 men. Is that correct?
What was that?
256 men.
Men?
The most men you can have. 256 men.
Probably. I don't remember how that was.
Well, I know it's at least 255.
Yeah.
But I went 250. In my mind, it's 256 because it's 255 and the one you're playing.
Well, it's probably 255 because 0 means you're game over.
Okay. So 255, not like the predecessor game, I think Defender or whatever it was, that wiped all your guys out when you got to that level.
Well, that's when the score overflowed, and we were aware of that. And I specifically allowed that to happen and not have a bug. I tested against that.
Right. Nice.
So that the score would flip over. It would actually set a bit to say, hey, it's overflow, and always put you on the high score to date table no matter what. So, we accounted for that. And we learned from our previous, bugs.
Well, that's when people try to play that specific game in a marathon, they literally almost have to have somebody watching their men so that they don't roll their men over and go to 0 men. I mean, it's very challenging. Let's see, what else? The pterodactyl bug.
Oh, yes. That was...
the history of the pterodactyl bug and the ledges and that fun stuff.
Well, we did a lot of testing with Joust because, again, the birds actually were controlled by their own little joystick and buttons, except for the Shadow Lords. He could cheat a little bit, but and so we were very concerned about the fact that they were actually flapping buttons, and that somehow players would take advantage of that. Well, we never really had any problems in all our testing. But when they started producing the games, all of a sudden on the East Coast, they heard about these people playing the game forever, killing the pterodactyl. And we didn't understand that at first, because the pterodactyl was a very deadly foe. You had to actually hit the pterodactyl right in the mouth. If you touched them, you're dead.
Right.
So how are they doing this? And then all of a sudden the West Coast chimed in to say that, oh, there's the people over here doing it too. And then we knew we had a problem.
Right.
And the internet wasn't around then, so it was all word of mouth back then. And
Quail hadn't invented it yet. Right?
Yeah, and the cameras were primitive and crude and still using film.
Right.
But anyways, we finally found out what they were doing and how they were doing it. Then came the solution. There were many different solutions, some more involved than other. But the easiest solution that we implemented was just to, instead of going, the pterodactyl actually aimed for the player on the bird. Well, the easy solution was just to aim for the legs of the bird. Therefore, it wouldn't impale itself when the player faced the right direction, and it would always be low. And that seemed to solve the problem. And then we had to make the running fix with the new ROMs.
I actually have a set of those.
Yeah. Some people like the old ROMs.
I mean, when I say I have a set of those, I have a set of the blue ones from Robotron that you guys burned them onto and test and put them out in mothers. I have that set up on the wall.
Yeah, okay.
In my collection. So, yeah, that's... Green is what most people play, although we still run into a lot of reds. Probably, I'd say probably 30% of the machines that I have registered are probably red ROMs still. So yeah, it was an interesting change.
They had produced quite a few games before they realized this issue.
Yeah. I the play being different, I found it interesting when I played at the Williams building that I played on a red ROM. So I actually played at Williams on an original machine, which gave me a little bit of fits because I hadn't played one for a while on red, and so it was just that little bit of change that I couldn't compensate for. I literally found myself cussing at myself, not being able to play well. And nobody else saw that, but I did.
But that was the only change. The birds didn't change at all. So
yeah, no, I did find that sometimes you literally would have Shadow Lords riding on the back of the pterodactyl, which was an interesting side effect of that.
Yeah, and whatever, just a fluke.
Just a little fluke that happened. So history aiming for the legs. How did you come up with 99 waves?
Well, we didn't think anyone would get that far. We knew that there were some people who were really good, but we still thought that the game was difficult enough. It actually saturated at an earlier number than 99, but the display actually went up to 99. Internally, I forget how many different waves, and then it would just repeat forever. So, and it wouldn't repeat at the first, as I recall. It would repeat at some number of the whole table.
It seemed like playing that it was around every 100 waves, the complexity changed and they came out a little faster or a little different.
I don't remember encoding anything like that.
Which is about every 2 million points if you're a good player. But of course that could be a mental thing too, because you get to a certain spot and things change. And it's like, rather than coming out this way, they go that way, and they're a little bit faster. When you say saturated, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, the logic just that's it. There was no more. They wouldn't get any better.
So they couldn't get any better.
They couldn't get any better. That was their limit.
Cool.
So if any player could surpass that, well, they could play forever, like you do.
Well, that's all relative too. At 60, I don't think I'm going to play like I did when I was in my 20s, and I currently am the oldest person ever to play 50 hours on any game.
Wow.
Which I did at 53, and that's pushing a decade ago too. Although I can sit down and play for 5 hours, and it just feels like I've been there an hour. Let's see, what else? We got the Now, you said politically correct.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was after the game had come out. They had... there were many different games. Some of them, there was a little bit of controversy. There was no regulation at that time on video games. But they were, shoot 'em games. There were a lot of shoot 'em games.
Space games, shoot 'em games.
This game, there wasn't any shooting involved. It was a contact type sport, and they were saying that this was more politically correct than the shoot 'em up games. And these are the critics of the industry saying this.
Politically correct. So you're not shooting somebody, but you're stabbing them with a lance.
Well,
so that's kind of okay. Because it's more noble, right? It's
Yeah,
more noble.
well, but then they would turn into an egg and they could hatch again. They
There
could
you
get
go.
reborn.
There you go.
So
Yeah, I like that. That is all the questions I have, but I'm sure there's some better. I have two. I guess I have two other things. One is your favorite joust memories.
well, Python was actually a very a interesting person, and when I was working with him, he was very enthusiastic. He actually made a poster, and all I've got is a little photograph of it. And he did this all on his own. And he even came up with the little text on the game and everything, promoting it.
Stick that up there. I'll see if I can zoom in on you. Up a little
higher.
higher. Ooh, there you go.
Yeah. But there was actually a full-size poster. This is just a photograph.
Got it.
Small photograph of it.
Yeah.
That's all that survived for me.
Yeah.